Welcome to the Myth, Legend and Lore podcast.
The Tale of Vivionn, the Giantess. One day, Finn and Goll, Kilta and Oscar, and others of the Fianna were resting after the hunt on a certain hill, now called the Ridge of the Dead Woman. And their meal was being got ready, when a girl of the kin of the giants came striding up and sat down among them. "Did thou ever see a woman so tall?" asked Finn of Goll. "By my troth," said Goll, "never have I, or any other, seen a woman so big." She took her hand out of her bosom, and on her long, slender fingers there were 3 rings of gold, each as thick as an ox's yoke. "Let us question her," said Goll. And Finn said, "If we stood up, perchance she might hear us." So they all rose to their feet, but the giantess on that rose up too. "Maiden," said Finn, "if thou have aught to say to us, or hear from us, sit down and lean thine elbow on the hillside." So she lay down, and Finn bade her say whence she came, and what was her will with them. "Out of the world over sea, where the sun sets am I come," she said, "to seek thy protection, O mighty Finn." "And what is thy name?" "My name is Vivionn of the fair hair, and my father Trian is called king of the land of lassies, for he has but 3 sons, and 69 daughters. And near him is a king who hath 1 daughter, and 80 sons. To one of these, Ada, was I given in marriage sorely against my will. 3 times now I have fled him, and this time it was fishermen whom the wind blew to us from off this land, who told us of the mighty lord here, named Finn, son of Cool, who would let none be wronged or oppressed, but he would be their friend and champion. And if thou be he, to thee am I come." Then she laid her hand in Finn's, and he bade her do the same with Goll MacMorna, who was second in the Fiann leadership, and she did so. Then the maiden took from her head a jewelled golden helmet, and immediately her hair flowed out in 70 tresses, fair, curly and golden, at the abundance of which all stood amazed. And Finn said, "By the immortals that we adore, but King Cormac and the poetess Etne, and the fair women folk of the Fianna would deem it a marvel to see this girl. Tell us now, maiden, what portion wilt thou have of meat and drink? Will that of 100 of us suffice thee?" The girl then saw Nu, the dwarf harper of the Finn, who had just been playing to them, and she said, "Whatever thou givest to yon little man that bears the harp, be it much or little, the same, O Finn, will suffice for me." Then she begged a drink from them, and Finn called his gillie Saltran, and bade him fetch the full of a certain great goblet with water from the ford. Now this goblet was of wood, and it held as much as 9 of the Fianna could drink. The maiden poured some of the water into her right hand, and drank 3 sips of it, and scattered the rest over the Fianna, and she and they burst out laughing. Finn said, "On thy conscience, girl, what ill be not to drink out of the goblet?" "Never," she replied, "have I drunk out of any vessel, but there was a rim of gold to it, or at least of silver." And now Kilta, looking up, perceived a tall youth coming swiftly towards them, who, when he approached, seemed even bigger than the maiden. He wore a rough, hairy cape over his shoulder, and beneath that a green cloak fastened by a golden brooch. His tunic was of royal satin, and he bore a red shield slung over his shoulders, and a spear with a shaft as thick as a man's leg in his hand. A gold-hilted sword hung by his side, and his face, which was smooth-shaven, was comelier than that of any of the sons of men. When he came near, seeing among the Fians a stir of alarm at this apparition, Finn said, "Keep every one of you his place. Let neither warrior nor gillie address him. Know any of you this champion?" "I know him," said the maiden. "That is even he to escape from whom I am come to thee, O Finn." And she sat down between Finn and Goll, but the stranger drew near and spake never a word, but before anyone could tell what he would be at, he thrust fiercely and suddenly with his spear at the girl, and the shaft stood out a hand's breadth at her back. And she fell gasping, but the young man drew his weapon out and passed rapidly through the crowd and away. Then Finn cried, red with wrath, "Ye have seen! Avenge this wicked deed, or none of you aspire to fiendship again." And the whole company sprang to their feet and gave chase to that murderer, save only Finn and Goll, who stayed by the dying maiden. And they ran him by hill and plain to the great bay of Tralee, and down to Tribute Point, where the traders from oversea were wont to pay their dues. And there he set his face to the west and took the water. By this time, 4 of the Fianna had outstripped the rest, namely Kilta and Dermot, and Glass and Oscar, son of Oisin. Of these, Kilta was first, and just as the giant was mid-leg in the waves, he hurled his spear and it severed the thong of the giant's shield, so that it fell off in the water. And as the giant paused, Kilta seized his spear and tore it from him. But the giant waded on, and soon the Fians were floundering in the deep water, while the huge form, thigh deep, was seen striding towards the setting sun. And a great ship seemed to draw near, and it received him, and then departed into the light. But the Fians returned in the grey evening, bearing the spear and the great shield to Finn. There they found the maiden at the point of death, and laid the weapons before her. "Goodly indeed are these arms," she said, "for that is thunder spear of the king oversea, and the shield is red branch shield." Then she bestowed her bracelets on Finn's 3 harpers, the dwarf Nu, and Blanet his wife, and the harper Daira. And she bade Finn care for her burial, that it should be done becomingly. She said, "For under thy honour and protection I got my death, and it was to thee I came into Ireland." So they buried her, and lamented her, and made a great far-seen mound over her grave, which is called the Ridge of the Dead Woman, and set up a pillar stone upon it, with her name and lineage carved in Ogham grave.